Okay, I guess we're on. This is April 4th, 1997. It's April 5th.
It's the
April 5th.
5th.
The day before Aunt Geneva's
81st birthday.
And not long before your birthday.
3 days before my 40th.
It's actually Hazel Geneva.
Oh, don't mention that. I've had more trouble with my name. I don't want any more. Everybody called me Geneva as long as I was growing up. And when I talk to myself, that's what I call myself.
But now everybody in Duluth calls you Hazel.
No, only the school
people.
the teachers and people who met me as a teacher. Everybody else calls me Geneva. The original family came, they were 3 brothers and a sister, weren't there? They came from England in 1684. And they came over and lived on the land that had been granted to William Penn. We came to Pitt.
I'm glad you have these dates.
In about 1912. I mean, the family did. We were born up there. Our dad was working in a store in town. They had moved from Kansas about 1912, expecting to farm and then cut lumber for the sawmill in Baudette for a living. But by the time they got up there, a fire had gone through. So they went into a town that was nearby and worked in a sawmill until my dad then finally came back out and farmed. And so we were living on a farm in a log cabin. You must remember the log cabin.
The log cabin, everything was log. You can tell how they were sitting.
Geneva's on the left, and then Bill, and then
Peggy
Mom,
is the baby.
yeah, and then Peggy's the baby, and this is Carlo, in case you
The
know.
dog.
This is Carlo.
We couldn't imagine life in a log cabin with a whole family and all we did. And imagine having a tiny premature infant in a cold climate in a log cabin.
Who was premature?
I was.
You were?
Yeah.
How premature?
Well, I weighed about, they didn't know how much I weighed. I was born in September, and sometime, a few months later, someone came through and had some fish scales. Nobody had scales around. They had some fish scales. They kind of, you kind of hold them swing them from the chain. And so then I was probably about 3 months old, and I weighed almost 6 pounds then.
Our cabin was just one room, and it was the way you arranged the furniture that designated the rooms. And there was a loft, and up in there was where our brother slept, and that also was used for storage.
Did they have a stairway up, or was that
No, he had to climb.
And I can remember when they were busy packing for something, Dad wanted something in the loft. So he would lift me up to the loft and tell me where to look for something that he wanted. I was often his helper there when he didn't want to climb a ladder, I suppose, or something. But I remember that loft. I also remember the blue box. We had no such thing as a beautiful trunk or anything. Dad built a big wooden box and painted it blue. And in that we held all our extra clothes and bedding and everything that was important to us. So anything we wanted, we went to look in the blue box for.
He liked blue. Later on, he painted a baby buggy. The new baby had come to the family living next door to us, and they needed a baby buggy. And I suppose that was one of ours that he painted up for this baby. But he painted it this baby blue, and we were supposed to take care of this little boy outside. And I remember trying not to get out of pushing that blue baby buggy around. Nobody else had a blue one.
Pretending you didn't belong to it.
There are the 2 brothers that homesteaded up there. There's the father of these 2 young ladies, and that's Uncle Guy. It was taken about 1894.
Okay.
And we are double cousins. The 2 sisters married brothers, but the Guy and Elda's children got all the curls, and we got the straight hair.
That's right.
Wait, who's cousins? Who? These 2 married?
These 2 married.
The brothers
sisters.
married
Married
sisters.
See, Grandma Brewer and Aunt Elda were sisters, and their husbands were
Was
brothers.
everybody in Kansas at the time?
Yeah, they were all
Yeah.
living in Kansas when they were married. They
And,
came up here when our brother Bill was about a year old and May was not quite a year old, Aunt Elda's little girl. And then the rest of us were all born up north.
Were they farming in Kansas? Is
Yes, they were all farmers, all around Emporia, Kansas, in the small towns, Americus and Dunlap, and none of them. Well, my grandmother lived in Emporia towards the end of her life. When my aunt, when our two fathers came up, here I'm doing it.
Here you're doing it. We're really sisters. I've been doing this
We have
too.
a hard time deciding that we both have the same father and mother.
And which one is Grandma Brewer?
She's standing up.
Oh, okay. And who's the other person?
My Aunt Elda, her
They're the
sister.
sisters that married the brothers.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Okay.
Two very dear women.
And Grandma Brewer was born what year?
92.
1892.
Sisters
She
and
should
working
remember
on the dates.
seeing her marriage license. She was married in 1910.
I have it framed up in the bedroom in my apartment.
Seems like it was 1910 or something.
Yeah, I think it was.
That
Yes,
sounds
because Bill
right,
was
yeah.
born in 1911 and they came to Minnesota in 1912.
Bill,
Yeah.
and your mother,
Oh.
and
Oh, I see. And
there's Peggy, there's Aunt Geneva.
Uh-huh. When did you move to Duluth?
1923.
So
Yeah,
that's when you.
or 20. Yes, 23. We lived in an apartment house in New Duluth, out in the new section of the town where the plant had been built.
The Becklinger block.
And it was about 6 families in there in that building, and then a couple of
Wow, they-
stores down below. And then when I was 10 years old, we moved into the house where we lived finally. And I don't know why we moved down there, except that I had scarlet fever, and they moved me in a van or something that came from the county service because I was contagious, so they wouldn't let me out. But they must have started moving at that time for another reason, and then I just happened to have the scarlet fever at that time.
I had scarlet fever too, but Mother hid me because she didn't want to be quarantined all over again. So I was upstairs in a bedroom and not telling you much about it.
Yeah, we didn't tell anybody about that.
Dad raised rabbits to eat. I know that
Where?
was.
Where?
Well, out in this so-called garage was an area that people once had chickens in. So Dad had rabbits there for a long
Well, we
time.
had a lot of space around that house, so that there was room for pens for them outside too.
And
We
remember,
just didn't tell anybody what they were eating when
No.
they came to our house and ate rabbit.
And you remember all the plays. We put on plays out in that garage. And there was still a ladder up to the loft. And you can imagine all the plays that we put on with the loft and the ladder. Especially, what was the name of the old story? Somebody, let down your hair that I may climb as if by stair. The suitor was on the bottom and the girl up on top.
Rapunzel?
Very fun. Yes. What is it?
Rapunzel.
Rapunzel, let down your hair that I may climb as if by stair.
Well, we all went. There were 8 children altogether because there were 4 in my uncle's family too. We all went through Morgan Park High School,
You saw that when you were there.
and that yes, you've seen that as you go through First Stowe and then Morgan Park.
Oh,
Everybody,
so
yes, everybody there worked in the steel plant. In fact, I think you had to work in the steel plant in order to be eligible for one of those houses.
But your home was
But-
3 miles away?
Yeah, well, you could go
Well,
to
because
school
we
there.
weren't
You just
living
couldn't
there.
live there.
Yeah. It was a public school, so they had to take us there. It was a whole
That's
area
where
school.
Grandpa worked.
The steel plant.
That's where he got hurt.
When was his accident?
Well, I guess maybe I was only about 12 years old. We were down in the house. We'd moved out of the apartment when I had scarlet fever, and I think that we only lived down there about 2 years before he was hurt. He was on a
He
crate.
was foreman for this one area. Someone came on duty whose job was to get up and run this rail, whatever it was, back and forth with the hot coals on it.
Hot steel.
Hot steel on it, yeah. And he was drunk. And just as Dad was in the middle of the place, he let loose of the hot steel and it all went down on Dad. And His legs and feet were
Yeah, his
badly
foot
burned.
was hit, so
Yeah,
his
so
foot
bad.
was very, very badly
He was
deformed
crippled from then
afterwards.
on.
Yes.
Yeah.
How was the depression for your family? Was it pretty
Well, of
tough?
course, by that time, my dad wasn't. He was already crippled because he worked for a few years after that. But during the Depression, Mother worked. She worked as a housekeeper, and it was because she had this work as a housekeeper that I got to go to college. Because the woman who was a good friend that she became a good friend that she was working with was interested in getting me to go to college. Well, when I was at Hamlin, Hamlin was so poor that the professors got their checks on one day and the next day they turned half of it back to keep the college going. So all over, at that time. See, this would have been 34 when or 35 when I started out.
Summer of 40 then
That we did.
I came up to Duluth, and we celebrated the 4th of July down at Zeiser's cottage.
Yes.
Was that your first date with
That
Don?
was the first time I had met Don.
So that was about 4th of July in 1940.
And then we were married in June of 1941 and had our 3 children 3 years apart, which was pretty good planning, I thought.
So were you both married in 1941? Isn't that the same year?
No, you were married
We were married in 41.
in the fall of 41,
October
was it?
41.
Yeah.
We both had to hurry and get married before the war started.
Yeah, we wanted
We wanted to go off to service.
we wanted the men to have some independence, so someone to take care of us even if they went to the war.
And what year did Peggy die?
She died in 1970. Yeah. So I think Bill died just about 3 years before she did. So it'd be 68 or 67. 2-3 years of each other. It just seemed all of a sudden it came, and then I on my husband's side then at the same time there were deaths in his family. So that was kind of a hard few years.
And what year did Don die?
1973.
Oh, just 3 years after Peggy.
Mm-hmm.
Boy.
Then I suppose we graduated from high school and we left home, didn't we?
And when did you move to the house I remember
Out in the country? Well, we moved out there then.
after you were married?
Yes.
That's the house you moved
That
to?
was Ruth was the first one born out there. The other 2 were born in Lakeside,
Oh, I see.
and then Ruth was born within a year after we moved out there.
Searching for 10 acres and independence.
Uh-huh. And I would just as soon stay back in the city. But every time I'd take a roll call of anybody in the family who wanted to move into town, I was the only one that voted yes. I was librarian at Central High School for 22 years in Duluth.
Is Central still there?
Yes, a new building. I was in that new building for about 6 years before I retired. I was there for 22 years and I retired in 1976. So that
Thank you, honey.
covers a long time.
And what about Uncle Don?
Thank you.
Oh, he worked in a furniture store
Thank you, Dave.
and he died. He retired because the store went out of business,
Thank you.
and at about the same time he had a heart attack, and so he didn't live more than about a year after his store closed and went out of business. But of course, in the meantime, I was still working. So he died quite young, and he didn't have much of a family. But he said after he was married, he was related to everybody in the state of Kansas. And our mother, at the last years of her life, spent it in a nursing home.
Which home was that?
And what was the name of it up on the hill? Chris Jensen. Chris Jensen. Mm-hmm.
And the apartment she lived in before that? What was that called?
It was in a high-rise
Uh-huh.
apartment building near downtown Duluth. And she lived there for quite a few years, didn't she?
She did very well, didn't she?
Yeah.
And how old was she? She's 98?
She died in March, and she would have been 99 in September.